He is Aaron Torress. Aaron, by the way, if you didn't know any better, you'd think we were Joe Rogan around here with all the ads. I appreciate you hanging in there. And
well, if you are Joe Rogan, fly me down to Texas. It's been a while since I've been, and I'll hang out in studio, and maybe we'll do some. I don't want to get political, but he did a pretty big interview about 6-8 weeks ago. I said maybe we could go for those numbers. But anyway, I don't want to get political because he was a politician. But anyway, I hope you're doing good. First of all, I appreciate your patience. You and your producer Scotty have booked me like 7 times, and I've canceled on you every single time. But I will say, I listened to the end of your last segment. I'm so in agreement with so much of what you said. So I'm actually legitimately fired up to talk about everything that, not just what we saw on the field, but all the discourse off of it over the last couple of days.
Well, yeah, and when you're done with Aaron here, you can make sure you check out the Aaron Torress pod. It is up. Of course, Fox Sports Radio, the college football recap show. We're recapping college football now, and we want to look a little bit forward. What was your biggest takeaway? Actually, no, we're gonna switch real quick because I want to ask you this top of mind. Sure. Last thing I watched last night before I went to bed was the Cowboys winning. Is Mike McCarthy going to keep his job now, dude?
Yeah, I think he will. And I'll tell you why. So, you guys know this, you all live in Texas, but, Jerry, for some reason, and I'm not totally sure why, he's got this reputation, obviously the background with the wildcatting and the this and the that. He's got this reputation as this maverick and this, and this, that. And maybe he was, 30 years ago when he was signing Deion Sanders and all that stuff. But, you mentioned Fox Sports Radio. I just go back to, I remember the year that Jason Garrett ultimately lost the job. I was filling in. It was right around this time. It was right around Christmas time, maybe right around New Year. There was one less week in the NFL season, so it happened a week earlier on the calendar. And the season ended. I don't remember all the details, but it was so obvious that Jason Garrett had to go. He wasn't the guy, whatever. And it just seemed like a pretty cut and dry. Thank you for your service. Best of luck in the future. And I remember hosting radio, and I'm hosting every single day, filling in on Fox Sports Radio. And Monday, it's like, Jason Garrett isn't fired yet. And what does that mean? And, Tuesday, they're thinking about moving him to the front office. And is he going to – and it was like a 6-day ordeal.
Dude, I remember that. Poor Jane Slater every day was like parked outside of the Cowboys facility in the Star, like maybe today.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not even being sorry, I think we had Jane Slater on our radio show at some point that week because, like you said, every single day it was like a news story that wasn't really a story. And so, I'm not in that market. I don't cover the team in any way, shape, or form, but just as an outside observer, it does feel like, listen, I think Jerry's very loyal to his people. I mean, we see the way that he pays his veterans and things of that nature. And I think McCarthy's doing enough. And I think now the excuse is, look at how hard they're playing for him. And it's like, well, why weren't they playing hard in like week 4 when they were getting their brains beat in by everybody? But listen, I'm not a billionaire. I don't run the team. It's not up to me to make the decisions, but rallying the troops when the team stinks, I don't think it should be the top line on a resume. And I know he's won all these regular season games, but we've seen the postseason meltdowns year after year. One of my great theories, it's a long answer, but one of my great theories was I actually thought he should have been fired after the first 49ers loss 3-4 years ago because they didn't know how to run a 2-minute drill. And basically it was because all these guys were on rookie contracts and there was a small window to have success. So anyway, thought Mike McCarthy should have been gone 3 years ago. He wasn't. Certainly thought he should have been gone after the Packers game last year. He wasn't. And somehow, some way, I think he's going to survive. And, and I don't know what that means. And this is the last point to the conversation, but because obviously he's on the last year of a contract. So does he get like a 4-year contract? I don't know. But I'll let Cowboy fans, cry in their pillows on that one. So
I had to ask you that because I follow you and I noticed you'd mentioned that. And I was like, man, that's becoming a real possibility here and what could be a reality. All right, back to Saturday and a little bit of Friday. What's your immediate reaction, your immediate takeaways from what was a mega weekend of college football? Some folks are disappointed. I am not. Where do you come down?
Yeah, I think with time to kind of take a deep breath, because I was on right after that Ohio State-Tennessee game, and it was such reaction to that moment. Ryan Day, what does it mean? I've been critical of Ryan Day. I think now that I've had 36 hours since the games went final, I think my big takeaway, and it's the least controversial takeaway you can have, it's really hard in college football to win on the road, especially when we inherently know that the team that is at home is better than the team that's visiting. And so, like, we could sit here and like pretend that we should be shocked that all these teams got blown out. But first of all, college football has always been a top heavy sport. I still think in this portal era, the difference between the top 5, 6, 7 teams versus even team 11, 12, 13, there's a big gap. Listen, Indiana, we know their resume. They played one legitimately awesome team all year and got destroyed until this weekend when they played a second one and got destroyed again. SMU played no great teams, a lot of good teams. We saw the result. And so, but what I also think is true is that, you look at the regular season, you look at all those Saturday night games in college football. It was Alabama beats Georgia at home. Next week, Alabama goes on the road and loses to Vandy. Texas A&M beats LSU at home. We think they're the greatest team in the world. A week later, they go on the road and lose to South Carolina. And so I'm not going to sit here and lie and pretend that I predicted all of the results that happened, because I didn't. But in hindsight, if you just think about it at its most basic level, already inferior team going on the road in a true road environment to a true home, to a team that's better in a true home environment, like, yeah, we're probably going to get 4 teams that are at home favored to win. And I think it's also, by the way, really quickly, and I'll toss it back to you, Steve, or Pete, because I know I'm going long, is like, I also think,
great, dude. Take your time. This is awesome.
Well, I was going to say, I also think that's inherently where the Alabama Ole Miss conversation falls apart. Alabama was 1-3 on the road this year. So I'm supposed to believe that they were going to go to Happy Valley and win 28-7 and do, so we can take this from wherever you want. But I think outside of who's in, who's out, who's right, who's wrong, I think even I, as somebody who covers this sport, underestimated, like, oh yeah, it's common sense. We see home teams destroy good teams every week thanks to that home crowd. We probably shouldn't have expected anything different this weekend.
Well, what are you hearing from all the work you do between the Fox Sports Radio, between your pod that is up now and people can get it wherever they get their podcast? A lot of really good college football stuff there. What are you hearing from people inside the sport? Now 48 hours, 72, whatever, removed from this magical weekend still, because Friday night before that Indiana game, it was just special. And awesome. The fact is, we're getting more football. We have a playoff now. We have more teams involved. But what are people saying inside the sport that you're talking to about this first weekend?
Well, listen, I obviously work for Fox Sports Radio. Fox Sports Radio, by the way, is actually owned by iHeart, not Fox Sports. So I bring it up because, when I say Fox Sports Radio, people are going to say, oh, you're going to fall in line with, the leagues that Fox has allegiance to and whatever. And I don't believe that. I believe what you and Scotty were saying prior to me coming on is accurate. I do believe the SEC is the best conference in college football. I don't think the gap is what it was 6-7 years ago. I just don't. And it's for all the reasons that we always talk about. The transfer portal, NIL, we see Michigan, Ohio State, all these, Oregon spending crazy money to be competitive at the top of the sport. But I think there is a difference, from what I can tell, between the messaging from ESPN and the messaging from the rest of the media. I see, take out my opinion, and I don't want to speak for other people, but just going off their social media feeds, and I know but I think the sentiment from a Joel Klatt, from a Nicole Auerbach, obviously Fox, NBC, is, hey, this was a great weekend. It's not perfect, but to your point, Pete, this is what we wanted. Yeah. And I was disappointed that it does feel like the ESPN narrative has been, well, so many of these teams didn't deserve to be here. We have to blow it up. We have to do it different. And that comes from, on the broadcast Friday night, Greg McElroy and Sean McDonough saying the Big Ten should not be considered an equal to the SEC. It's Kirk Herbstreit saying we have to reevaluate how we pick teams, which in and of itself is not a bad statement, but it also doesn't acknowledge that there were some teams in the SEC that got in that had some real holes on their resume. I keep using the example. Texas, 11-2 overall, 0-2 against top 25 teams this season. Georgia, 2 losses to Georgia. SMU's resume was no different than Texas's on the final day of the regular season. Indiana had the same number of top 25 wins on the final day of the regular season as Texas. So I have no problem arguing that we need to consider, hey, and I've actually made this argument, that it can't just be raw number of wins. Where my issue comes in and where my frustration, frankly, comes in is this concept that we're going to criticize Indiana. We're going to criticize SMU, but Texas is somehow immune to it. Tennessee, by the way, had one great win, and we don't talk about the fact that basically after the Alabama game, every win in SEC play was to the bottom half of that league. So again, if we want to have the bigger picture conversation, that's fine, but we have to do it fairly and transparently. And you can't talk about Indiana's schedule, and you can't talk about SMU's schedule without talking about Texas's schedule, because there's a whole lot of nothing on there either. So again, I think the conversation, outside of the faces of the sport that want to make it, it's just an interesting dichotomy, because it does feel like there's two separate conversations going on at once, if that makes sense.
Great anecdote, by the way, reminding people and really revealing to people that Fox Sports Radio is owned by iHeart. So there's not that, allegiance or affiliation.
Nobody's calling me to say, hey, stick up for Indiana. I just think it's like, if we're going to talk about how bad Indiana's schedule is, tell me where the great wins were for Texas before the Clemson game. But
dude, I was surprised. I'm a play-by-play guy, and I'm never going to, like, Sean McDonough has hung the moon.
Of course, he's great,
But I was surprised. I was like, all right, let's just call the game. Like, I don't think we need to go back. I understand it's topical, but I wasn't looking for that conversation at that point in time. I was kind of, I was like, okay, this is interesting.
And just really quick, and so I agree with you. And listen, I'm obviously a very opinionated person, and I'm not afraid to, call out injustices that I believe are injustices. But and by the way, I wasn't perfect this weekend. There were moments where I was like, these games kind of stink. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't act that way too. But this weekend was supposed to be a celebration of college football, and I don't feel like the primary broadcaster whose job it is to celebrate this sport did that. By the way, it extended, and I understand the context of talking about Indiana Friday night after that blowout is different than after Saturday when all of the blowouts had happened. But I'll also say, Indiana, by the way, there was stuff on College Game Day about Indiana not deserve. So I was a little bit disappointed, and I've seen, and again, I'm not trying to speak for other people, but I saw Matt Leinart, who obviously has a big role on Fox, hey, let's celebrate this sport. Joel Klatt has said similar things. And I was a little bit disappointed that it did feel like from the primary broadcaster, the tenor was not, let's celebrate this sport. It's let's tear it down, and let's be transparent. A lot of the tearing down is negative and slanted towards their non-partners and slanted in favor of their league partners.
So you mentioned the SEC and the Big Ten, right? That's the differentiator there. ESPN loves its SEC, and I get it. Look, ESPN pays me. But there's something to.
I hope I'm not going to get you in trouble here. I'm sorry.
Come on, man.
Crushing you. Herb Street's going to call you. Dude, who was that guy you had on your show, Pete? What are you doing? Get him off air.
Hey, look, and we live in a climate, and you know this too, Aaron, where people are going to come for you as long as you keep it above board. And we're debating here. We're talking about football. It's fun. I appreciate, like you, more of the celebration aspect of it. I want you to put on or grab your crystal ball. I got two more things for you because I know you're a busy guy. When you look at this coming set of games, who's got a better chance of winning? Because the big time underdogs, Boise State or Arizona State.
Ooh. That's tough, because I heard your guys' conversation about Arizona State with Scotty, and I think it's 1,000% accurate. Is just the idea of the way Arizona State plays, and we saw it with Clemson. I mean, Clemson, they're on the goal line, they're trying to run the ball up the middle, they can't do it. So I would say Boise by default. The other thing with Boise, and I'm not saying that I'm picking the upset, but what I will say is, they played one playoff team outside of them. They didn't play themselves, but they played one playoff team all year. It was in Eugene. That was a ball game. And so I would probably lean Boise, and I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I feel great about either of those matchups. But I would probably lean Boise in that scenario.
All right, last one for you. We're going to get off the playoff, but I do want to stick with college football. Sure. What's the biggest story coming this offseason that nobody's talking about right now? When the dust settles with the college football playoff, whether it's a coaching change or whether it is going to be a change with NIL or anything, and this can be one, just your speculation and opinion, or two, maybe it's related to something you're sourced up on, because I know you are. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I could be wrong. I don't think we're getting any sweeping coaching moves. I will say I do think Ryan Day's situation, all the messaging out of Ohio State was there's nothing that can happen this weekend. I think if they had taken a bad loss at home after Ohio State fans were clearly boycotting by selling all their tickets to Tennessee fans, I think something could have happened. But I don't think Ryan Day's leaving. I don't think Lincoln Riley's a candidate anywhere because we've seen the product on the field. I don't think Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian. The only thing that immediately jumps to mind is I think it's unfair and I think it's dumb, but I think there's going to be conversation about realigning this playoff in some way, shape, or form. Now, I will say I absolutely understand the argument of ranking of seeding teams based on ranking and not giving automatic bids. Okay, so my one gripe, if you will, is I will say it is unreasonable that Oregon draws the 8th best team in the rankings, as the number 1 seed. And then, by default, Arizona State gets the 4, whatever. Like the example I've used consistently is if Duke and North Carolina are the 2 best basketball teams in college basketball on Selection Sunday, whoever loses in the ACC tournament doesn't get pushed down to a 7 seed or a 9 seed. Like they're still a 1 seed. They just whatever. And so I do think there's a conversation about the 4 buys going to the 4 highest ranked conference champions. I think that's fair, but I don't think that's where it's going to end. I think there's already been kind of a toe in the water about do we go to 14 and give an automatic buy to the SEC and the Big Ten champions? Is there a minimum number of bids for those power conferences? Now, again, I think based on what we saw this weekend, I think that's kind of silly. I don't think I think the minimum number of bids feels absurd to me. But I just bring it up because it's going to be a conversation. I mean, the summertime, there's going to be nothing going on. These ADs are going to be meeting. And the thing the only thing that really matters is the Big Ten and the SEC do know that they have power basically over the rest of the sport. So I think that to me becomes the conversation. I'm not saying it's fair. And I would like to see us play a couple 12-team college football playoffs before we blow it up. But that is what comes to mind as a topic that we'll be talking about in June, July. Because I could be wrong. I don't see the sweeping, stunning coaching move in January, the Nick Saban, Jim Harbaugh of last year.
All right, Aaron Torress, always cooking, man. I really appreciate your time spending with us today. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, dude, and hopefully we'll be able to link up in the future here.
Yeah, anytime you need me, thanks for your guys' flexibility, and Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas to you guys and your staff. And, dude, credit to you for knocking out the show on a Monday, man. I know it's that time of year where everybody wants you at home and all that stuff. So have a happy holiday and we'll talk soon. Okay.
All right, Aaron, take it light, buddy. That was Aaron Torress. We really appreciate his time. And of course we appreciate our main man, Scotty Swingler, putting that together. Coming up next, fresh off of a plane from Las Vegas, not that fresh, about a week and a half ago. John Morris, though, shares with us his experience winning the Chris Schenkel Award. And we talk a little bit about the history of broadcasting here in Central Texas. The Pete Souza Show, powered by the Rogue Media Network. Stay with us.